Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by and checking out this video. Drop a like and subscribe if you want to see more of my content or you want to see my live streams, which is really the more fun part than me just talking about news and regurgitating info. But basically, if you want to figure out what game I'm going to be playing next, it's probably going to be Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. And the reason why is because they've actually made consistent strides throughout the last year. The game released, I believe, in March or April of 2020. And since then, they've been consistently updating, consistently adding new features. The unofficial patch has become something I don't really even need anymore. Like, they've made the game better and consistently better over the months that they've been working on it. And every single month has come with some great new additions and some, like, user-friendly changes. Whereas other developers that create these titles, these early access titles, seem to, let's just use Blizzard as an example. They released Reforged last year, and that was horrible. Like, it was a full cost title, and like it didn't feel like a full cost title. I actually got a refund on it because it felt like a fucking scam. But this is one of those early access titles, along with Baldur's Gate 3, where it's like I've seen steady progress and steady progression, steady improvement. Now, Baldur's Gate 3 isn't to the same extent as Mount & Blade, because Mount & Blade has really done like a complete 360. Like, not even a 180, a 360. Like, it's gone all the way back around. It was good when I first played it, then I started getting upset with the lack of features and stuff missing. And there's still stuff missing from the game. But it's right back to where I'm like, okay, this is something I want to hop into. So recently they've announced a few major changes, and I want to go over the single-player changes because I'm personally more interested in them. I'm not very interested in the multiplayer changes. If you want a list of the multiplayer changes, I could just rattle off what's really the biggest thing coming out. And that's the ability to duel people in these set little battlefields where you're going to be able to have one-on-one duels. And you can basically just go up to anybody, press F, and you challenge them. And yeah, it should be pretty interesting. I'm just not really that into it because I don't really have a lot of friends who would be playing the game in the first place. So it's like, first off, I wouldn't duel with them. I just play multiplayer with them. But a lot of my friends are still on consoles, so it's a little bit difficult for us to like meet up on games like this because most of them don't have very good PCs and stuff like that. So it's a situation where I'm just not incentivized to play. Like, I'll play Call of Duty, I'll play single player, or I'll play by myself in multiplayer, or I will play with my friends in multiplayer, or we'll play some Warzone or something like that. And the reason being is because we can all play together. We all basically know the game. Like, as long as you've got a console, you can run the game, and it's pretty much fair across all platforms. So, anyway, looking at what Tale Worlds has done, it does some pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff in Development Update 7. So the major thing that I'm going to focus on is the battle terrain system. So let me just get the video prepared, and yeah, without further ado, let's swap over to the display and just watch a little bit, and then I'll talk about it and give my thoughts and opinions on what's basically going to change in the game. Since it's one of those games where they'll make like big changes, then they'll step back and they'll start developing more again, and they're not going to get changes for a month or two, and then they're like, okay, now we've got this stuff ready for you. And it's like, the more they keep on doing that, the closer they're getting to the full release. And I'm just excited to see what the game's going to be like at full release. That should be pretty promising. So let's get over to the display and let's just watch this. Ah, it's on mute.
Next up, we have a fairly significant change that we've been working on for some time now, and is getting to the point that we're ready to show it. But before we go on, we just want to be clear that this is still a work in progress and subject to change, and with the scale of this update, it's likely that work will continue on this well into the future.
Yep.
The battle terrain system is a new approach to how scenes are selected for field battles in relation to the location.
So if you've played any Mount & Blade Bannerlord 2, you've probably been in a situation where you've attacked somebody around a bridge just like they did, and you're going to have to start a battle. But you weren't able to really have a battle that was emblematic of the location in which you were actually at. And now if you look at this battlefield, it's got a bridge, it's got water that you have to cross over. Like, it looks like the battlefield from the campaign map. And so if you're a fan of Total War and stuff like that, some of this stuff has existed in previous Total War games, but it's never existed to the extent that this one has. Because I feel like the ability to command your troops on the battlefield and make a battlefield like this playable and fun for a first-person or third-person experience when you're commanding your troops on the battlefield as opposed to being the general in the sky that you are in Total War. I really feel like it's promising and can lead to a lot of nice changes. Like there's already been a few different battles where like you'll be close to a city and the city will be like in the background, or you'll be next to a village and then like you'll have a battle in the village even if the villagers aren't a part of it. Like that type of stuff has already existed, and it's cool to see and cool to experience. But what I really think is interesting is you now have that capability when you're outside of like iconic locations. It will do this stuff at bridges, it'll do this stuff at passes, most likely.
Of the combatants
It should be
world
interesting.
map. Currently, whenever a battle begins, the game
So this is how the current system is. You can see that really what it breaks down is like if you look over here by the lake, you'll notice how there's like edges to the lake, and if you're like next to the lake, you'll get like a lake battlefield. You see what I'm saying? But then if you're over here in the white stuff, which are the plains, you'll get a plain battlefield. And like over here, you might get a river, but you're never going to get really the full effect of like the 2 bridges or the 3 bridges or whatever. And it's like you end up in a position where a lot of the battles start to feel the same, and they're on recycled terrain regardless of what terrain you're using. And so the new system that they're about to announce, the new system that they're about to talk about, promises to change it up a lot.
World map location and randomly select from a connected pool of maps. With the new system, the world map has been divided into regions, with each region.
And so you can see all the way up here, you got 1 in Vlandia, and then if you go all the way over here to Kuzite territory, you got 147. So I'm assuming that holds true, and 148 is technically the highest number, because I don't see anyone that approaches it. And if you look down here, the Azerite territory is split up into 60 and then 70 over here. So it's like, it really looks like they've... Oh, is that 155 or 35? No, that's 35. Wow. Handwriting's as bad as my mom. Anyway. It's 148. We'll just go with 148, right? So at 148, that's basically how many new battle zones that are going to be in it. And if you look at the zones, those are... I don't want to say they're going to end up being unique maps, but the change is quite drastic. Because if you look at that last screen, the one that I had previously, this was the yellow lake. But now it's split up into 2 separate zones. And like regardless where you are on one side of the lake, it will give you 28, and the other side will give you 27. And then there's a few changes that you've got. Like I feel like I can't entirely explain all of this stuff because A, I'm not necessarily a video game programmer. I know code, I understand it, but from what I can tell from what they're explaining here is it's going to take your location and your direction into account, and it's also going to take the location of the battle's engagement into account like it did previously, except there's going to be more maps that are specific to those locations because they've gone around and changed it. So instead of having so many different pie slices of zones where it's like it will throw you a map that like maybe you'll fight a battle in the same spot and it will be a different map, but I feel like now if you're in the same location, it should be a similar battlefield. Like I'm assuming like over here you've got 108 and 107. So in these 2 zones, I'd imagine that you would get, say if you fought a battle up here, it'd look one way, and then if you fought a battle over here, it'd look slightly different. It'd be a similar biome, similar environment, but the difference would be the details that are in that environment. And so I feel like they're easily able to do that, and it should be easy to accomplish, and we'll see what ends up happening. Because if you look down here at 107, you've got this little like river system, and like there's obviously going to have to be some use of the river system on those battlefields. So we'll see what ends up happening. It's pretty exciting because there's really only been 1 bridge map, and it hasn't even really been a bridge. It's like a bridge over like a dried out creek, so you could actually use your horses and go across the creek and flank your opponents. And so it'll be interesting to actually fight on bridges that are massive, like, and give you, I don't want to say like a feel of like Roman style combat, like, but you get what I mean, like back in the day. Like it feels, I don't know, it's more like a Total War choke point from Rome 2 or something like that. So it should be interesting. Let's continue on.
Region being connected to its own specific team. The system also takes into account the location and direction of the parties within the region, and uses this to determine where each side will spawn in the battle. This update aims to give you a more immersive and strategic experience that allows...
I mean, you see this location? This is a battlefield, obviously, since they're working on it, they're adding it to the game. This is a battlefield I've never personally fought on because it hasn't been added to the game yet. And so it's something that I'm really excited to see because I think it's going to be a really good addition for the developers to add something like this where it takes into the terrain into account into giving you a better battlefield. and gives you like bridges and choke points and things that you can use. So say if you're a smaller force, you can actually hold off the enemy by using the bridge as a choke point, as opposed to just starting on opposite sides of each other and just being absolutely demolished because you don't have a way to like limit the amount of hostiles that are able to approach you. So it looks like it's going to be a promising update, and honestly I'm really excited for it because I want to really get back into Mount and Blade 2, but it's a little tough to get into it since the changes are so slow and so non-consistent. Like if it was a full release game, I'd be in a position where it's like, okay, the diplomacy would be fixed, like a lot of the stuff would be fixed, but frequently when I'm playing Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord, I get to the point where it's like, okay, I want to do this, but the game doesn't support me doing this yet, so I need that to progress in my game. So without it, I kind of just hit this stalemate where I just sort of stall out. So let's keep on going and see if they talk about anything more interesting.
How should take the terrain into account when planning your battles?
Yep.
And just while we're on the topic of scenes, we want to highlight the 6 new siege scenes that will be making their way to the beta version of the game in the next update.
Yep.
These new Empire and Vlandia maps consist of 4 cities and 2 castles, so if you're on the lookout for a new place to go...
So this is going to be a total of 4 cities and 2 new castles for the Empire and Vlandia, which, I don't know, I don't spend a lot of time over on the Vlandian side of the world, but I do spend a lot of time on the Empire side of the world, and since the Empire is spread out, like it's massive and it's in the middle of Calradia, so it really is an awesome thing to be able to see that they're consistently going back and they're trying to update and add some more variety to things. Because each city honestly has its own unique feel, but the problem is the assets in the city feel the same. And so like if you're in Azrai territory, there's not a lot of changes that go on. Like either you'll be in the desert or you'll be like on the coastline. And like the coastline cities all sort of have the same feel, and like the inland cities also have the same feel as like other inland cities. The real difference is like if you go between Battalion and Azrai, or what's the one up north? I can't even remember. There's Vlandians, Battanians, Azerai, Kuzites, the Empire. There's one more. I can't remember the northern faction. I want to say... No, it's not Skellige. That's from The Witcher 3. Oh my god, I can't remember who they are. I know their leader, I think. Oh my god, I can't remember who they are. Anyway, doesn't much make a difference. But in between all the factions and their differences, their cities are the most different aspect between them. Obviously, they've got their troop differences too. So like if you go from one major city, like say you go from Vostrom, which is an imperial city, and then you go to Al-Haik, I think is one, for the Azerai, like they're going to have different architecture styles, which is good. Like it's not like they're copy and pasted routinely, but the problem is at the end of the day that in between their own faction they don't have enough stylistic differences. So it's something where you'd want them to add more as the game goes on, and you would expect from a full release for them to have more detailed stuff. And so the fact that they're going back and actually trying to do that is very impressive to me. I mean, it's what we should expect from a company who sold us a game for early access, that they're continuing to update it, continuing to make progress on it, and continuing to actually add to the experience in a meaningful way and give us more content to bite our teeth into.
Call home, the next beta update might be a good place for you to start.
Yep. I mean, just look at these scenes. Like, if you've played the game, you know that type of scenery is just not in the game. What's this faction? It's this faction. Is this the faction I cannot remember? Sturgia! Woo! Okay,
well,
got it.
Next update.
There we go. Whew.
Pillaging is a new option that was made available to successful besiegers in the recent 1.5.8 beta update. With this update, conquerors are able to pillage or devastate settlements upon capturing them, netting them a quick boost to gold and morale in exchange for damages to the settlement and its inhabitants.
Yep.
Next up, we have an update on the Battalion Armory, which was recently expanded.
And so this is what I was talking about when they were adding new armor sets and other things to the game. It really shows, and it expands the game, and it makes the experience better. So say if you wanted to roleplay as a Celtic warrior or a Battanian, basically, since the Battanians are the Celtic faction in the game, like it really adds when you're able to get stuff like this to the game. It adds to your experience, it adds to your enjoyment. Like, it's stuff that you need to have in a game where it's like all factions have full fleshed out armor designs, ranging from light armor at the beginning to high tier armor at the end. And adding that, I'm not going to say it adds to the spice of life, nothing like that, but it adds variety. It adds, like, if people all look similar in the game, you're going to eventually get to a point where it's like, okay, well, we're just fighting the same people regardless of where we are. Like, that's not that entertaining. And that's the... Like, if you look at my cousin doesn't like to play Total War 3 Kingdoms. Why? Because everything feels the same. He likes Warhammer, where you can have dragons, and every faction has its own unique units, whereas in 3 Kingdoms, they share the same units. So it's just one of those things where it's like the more variety you get, the easier it is to engage people for longer.
The 158 beta version of the game with the addition of 9 new Celtic-inspired helmets. Next, we have a couple of battle-related updates.
Yep.
First is a small improvement to the death camera that will be coming with the next beta patch. This update,
and so if you've noticed, every time it's cycling through, you see the helmets. So I don't know if you guys caught that, but it's like when you die right there, you see how that helmet's there? That, to me, that indicates that it's another leader. So if you look at who died, it looks like Inric died in the top right to a Imperial Sergeant Crossbowman. And so if you look at everybody else who you cycle through, they've got that helmet. And that helmet, to me, indicates that they're going to be like a lord or something, a high-tier person. And so that's basically what's been going on.
Of high importance first, such as lords, companions, generals, and sergeants. And second was a recent change to the kill feed that can be found in the 158 beta version of the game.
Yep.
This change added an option that allows you to remove the names of non-hero characters from the kill feed, making it more compact and less obtrusive.
Yep. Makes it a lot more simple. I wouldn't do that because I like to know who gets fought and who dies.
Video, we are pleased to announce the arrival of a classic
Sandbox
game mode.
Yep.
Sandbox lets you jump into the game with a clean slate, letting you forge your own path in Calradia without the main storyline to guide you.
Yep, it should be. That promises to be awesome.
With Sandbox character creation, we are introducing body weight and build sliders to both story and Sandbox mode, so that you may further customize your character. While creating your Sandbox character, you will also need to select an age group, which will determine...
They finally fixed this issue, one of my biggest issues with the game.
Furthermore, your character's culture is linked to your starting position on the world map, allowing you to decide where your adventure begins. And finally, if
this is also a big one.
Rtx Graphics Card, make sure to download the recent 157 hotfix that allows you to activate NVIDIA's deep learning super sampling image upscaling technology.
Yep, DLSS baby.
And that's it for development update 7.
Alright, so there's some pretty big things that I want to just cover in the last little bit there. So DLSS is obviously a huge thing, but let's start with the sandbox. So the addition of sandbox into the game, as you can see under my name, they've got the nice title sandbox. That's what they're showing. And if you look right above my window here, you see the actual thing that you can click on. So it's basically going to be a campaign without the main storyline in it. That's basically what you want to think of it as. And that's something that I've not necessarily been asking for because I like the main campaign stuff. But I also feel like the main campaign stuff sort of shoehorns you into supporting an empire and sort of forces you to get involved in the international politics of the game. And I'm just not that big of a fan of like either supporting another empire. I want to create my own empire. And it's really difficult for me to do it in the terms of the story. Like a lot of the mechanics in the game aren't there yet, so I can't be entirely upset at it, but it's always been one of those things that's difficult for me to achieve. And the fact that they're going back and creating a sandbox version of it where you can like start wherever, you can like experience the game in a new way, like I actually really appreciate that. I don't think it's going to ultimately be that much more different than the campaign, because the campaign ultimately becomes what the sandbox would become anyway, which is like you stop doing the main storyline relatively quickly and you just focus on joining a faction and ranking up in it, and ranking up your clan. The next thing that I want to talk about is the DLSS edition. So a lot of new games have been getting DLSS added, and that's something that we should all see. If you have an RTX game or RTX graphics card, games that don't have DLSS honestly kind of just fall flat, if that makes any sense. Like what was it? Modern Warfare doesn't have DLSS support. I think they had it for like a little bit. Like I remember being able to slide it. I remember having DLSS for a bit, but it was removed from the game. But then Cold War has DLSS, and like it really does increase your frame rate. Like Cold War, I'm already playing at above 100 FPS, so it doesn't make a difference really to me. I don't need to be at 144 FPS. But it's like in a game like this, where it has a tendency to slow down in certain locations, it slows down due to having so much to compute on the screen at once. So I don't know exactly how much DLSS will help. In fact, I've used it a bit, and it hasn't seemed to be that useful, but we'll see what happens when it's fully released in a full patch, no longer in beta form. But yeah, I'm really excited about the stuff that they can add to the game, and I'm really excited about all the stuff they've got moving forwards. And one of my biggest changes, actually, that I'm happy that Sandbox does is that you can choose the starting age of your character. The age that you choose to start with, you have 20, 30, 40, 50. If you choose 50, then you're going to start with a bunch of skill points that you can then allocate to your character. But if you start at 20, you're going to start with less skill points. And that's something that I think is fair. I'm happy they worked that into the storyline, because I really had a problem in the main campaign of, like, you start the game, your character's, like, already 30. Like, you get a few years in, your character's, like, 35, 36, and, like, it feels like the game's almost over at that point, especially since there's so many bad mechanics regarding creating a family, getting a bigger clan, like getting your siblings to like be married and make more offspring. Like it just becomes like such a big freaking problem, because a lot of these mechanics in the game just aren't there. And so they need to fix those mechanics, because like I think it is in the main campaign, where you start and you're like 30, and then your sibling's like 25, but your sibling who's 25 has so many more abilities than you do. Like their skills are so much higher than yours. Like it starts to become a little bit obnoxious, and so it's a good thing that they went back and they've sort of reworked that for Sandbox. I hope they rework it for the main campaign, but for me it doesn't much matter, since I just do. I think it's Alt tilde. I've opened up the what's it called? I opened up console commands in the game, so I can literally just change my character's age whenever I want. It makes life a lot easier when I do that. So yeah, it's just one of those things. They're clearly updating the game. They're going back. They're making changes. Really, the thing I'm most excited about is the battle terrain feature. I don't think there's anything else that I'm more excited about. I mean, the DLSS should look promising. Like, see this scene? You see how it's like 48 FPS on this side, it's 65. Oh wow, we're gaining 17 FPS. Like, honestly, that's a little bit of a misnomer, because at least for me, I'm playing with a Titan RTX. It's not the next... the 30 series is, in theory, more powerful than the Titan RTX, but they don't have as much VRAM. Anyway, we don't need to get into that conversation, but I was testing out this system in battles, and I was using performance, ultra performance, quality, and those were the DLSSs I was using. There might have been a fourth. I can't remember, but I was just looking at the scenes. The scenes didn't change that much in visual fidelity, and my frame rate didn't improve by that much at all. And I was bringing like 800 people fighting against an army of 200, so there's like 1,000 people, the max that you could have on the battlefield. And what really I noticed happened was when the front lines met up and started fighting with each other, there was a significant slowdown in the frame rate, like significant, and that's because it's not recording everything that goes on screen. It's like doing the interactions between the characters. And that was the biggest slog and the biggest slowdown. So I don't know how much DLSS will actually do to actually improve the experience, but if you're somebody who isn't getting 60 FPS to begin with, this is obviously going to be a massive upgrade for you, because I was getting around like 100 FPS. In the menus, I get like 144. Obviously, it's not that tough, but when I'm on the campaign, it's like 100. And then if I'm fighting in a battlefield, it's like 60 to 80. So it's like I'm already in a range where it's like above 60 FPS. It looks really good. The problem is when you add DLSS, it doesn't necessarily get that much better, at least from what I saw. Now there's other games where it's like in Cold War, I'm already at 100 FPS, but including DLSS gets me to like 120, 130. Like it really does make a significant difference. It's like a 20% increase in FPS. So I don't know. It's interesting. We'll see what ends up happening with it, and if they include more NVIDIA features. Like, there's a few more that NVIDIA has sort of talked about, and they've brought into, like, NVIDIA Reflex, I think it's what it's called, and they brought that into Cold War, but we'll see what ends up happening. But yeah, I'm really excited to get back into this game. I'm interested in getting back into the title, and the more that they do these types of updates where they add more content, they add more armor models, they like change mechanics, they give you stuff like Sandbox, like they're changing the experience so that it's like more entertaining when I come back to it. So hopefully they've done a good job. I'll let you guys know I don't know if they're going to be updating the beta or if they're going to give like a full patch that includes all this stuff coming up pretty soon. But within the next week, expecting to start streaming it again because it's one of those things that I've been excited for. I've been waiting for it, and now that I've gotten it confirmed they're going to be working on it, I have an incentive to go back and start playing it. So I've played the beta, played a bit of the DLSS, but I'm not ready to start streaming it yet. I want to wait for the full release of the terrain system and all that stuff to get back into streaming it, because the terrain system is something that I think is going to be interesting to play. Like, new maps and new fights are really this. It's the variety. You just need to have a little bit more variety in a game like this, and the more variety you get, the better the experience is. So we'll see how it works. I'll see you guys next time. Hope you had a great day and enjoyed this content. I'm out of here. Peace.